Hi, I'm Alyce-Kay Ruckelshaus at Threshold of Hineni, and we are on part 6 of the Passover series. Today we're going to be talking about the different elements on the Seder plate. And for the Passover Seder, which is the first night of Passover, we have a plate on the table that we call the Seder plate because it has the elements of the Seder on it. The matzah is on a separate plate. The wine, of course, is in the glasses. Wine or grape juice or whatever you're drinking is in the glasses. And then you have this plate. And usually it either has cups in it or it has little indentations where you can put the things, and then it'll have the labels in Hebrew of what's supposed to go in each of those little dishes or indentations, hollows. And sometimes it'll have it in English as well. So anyway, the elements of that plate are important parts of the Seder meal and important parts of the story that you're telling as you go through this meal. So the first element on the plate is the parsley. And some people use other green vegetables. I think maybe celery or something. I don't know. I've always used parsley, and every Seder that I've been to has used parsley, but I do know that there are some other green vegetables that can be used. And that represents several different things. We dip it into salt water at one point in the Passover because the salt water is supposed to remind us of our tears in slavery. And so this reminds us of the Jews' tears as they were enslaved in Egypt. It also is supposed to remind us of our tears when we were enslaved to sin. And so it's a time to stop and really think about what it was like to not know God, to not have that relationship with Him, and to be enslaved into sin. The other meaning, though, of that parsley is new life. We have the freshness, the green. This is in the spring, and so we have this symbol of new life. The next thing that's on the Seder plate is the shank bone. This I have never quite figured out because it's supposed to be on the Seder plate, but a lamb shank bone is really big. So what I've read and what I've seen at most of the Passover Seders that I've been at is a chicken bone, like a drumstick. And so what I've always done is gone and gotten a drumstick and let one of my kids eat it and, wash it off real well, and then we roast it in the oven. I did go to one Passover where they actually had a lamb shank bone, and they had it on a whole separate table by itself. And so the person who talked about the shank bone in the Seder, rather than holding up the Seder plate, they pointed to the table that had the shank bone on it. So, those are a couple of different ways that you can handle it. In a pinch, one time somebody ate the chicken and threw away the bone. They didn't realize that I was saving it for Passover, and so at the last minute I found out that I didn't have a bone. So I used a dog biscuit. And I don't think God was offended because the point was the meaning, not the outward appearance, but what the meaning was. But it was a little funny. And so, it's best to try to have a bone. So the third thing that's on the Seder plate is the bitter herbs. And this is horseradish. Horseradish is pretty bitter. Now, I grew up not having horseradish. I don't think I ever had horseradish, as far as I know, in my life growing up. And so this was something that was very unfamiliar to me. And so usually I just go to the store and I get a jar of horseradish off the shelf. As I mentioned in a previous one, if you have a large Jewish community where you live, most grocery stores will actually have a Passover display area where they have the matzah, the wine, the horseradish, all different things, and they're all kosher. I don't worry as much about being kosher unless I'm actually going to have Jews at my Seder table, but normally I don't, and so I don't really worry about being kosher. And if you do want to worry about being kosher, there are a lot of good websites about that. Just send a comment to me asking about that, and I can refer you to some that can help you with that. That's especially important if you are going to have anybody who is Jewish at your Passover or Seder. But I don't worry about that so much. So I just get something off the shelf. You do want to think, though, about who your guests are. One year, I think I told about this in another video, I'm not sure. Anyway, one year we had quite a crowd in our home for Passover. We usually have about 20 to 25 people. And I had just, gotten a jar of Passover off the shelf, of horseradish off the shelf, and I hadn't really paid too much attention to it because, like I said, I didn't know anything about horseradish. I didn't grow up with it. Well, it turned out that I had gotten some really, really spicy horseradish. And so when we had the matzah sandwich with the horseradish and the charoseth, everybody ran to the sink to spit it out, except for my pastor, who was Mexican. And he just sat there with this big grin on his face. And I think it was probably a little spicy for him too. I don't know. But, he wanted us to all think that he was all macho and everything, And anyway, so his kids even ran to the sink to spit it out. So it was pretty spicy. When you have the bitter herb and you have it in the matzah sandwich with the charoseth does help set that off a little bit. And I usually warn people, don't use a whole lot of the horseradish unless you really like horseradish. I happen to really love it now, but especially on things like corned beef. But oh man, now I'm getting hungry. It's almost dinner time. Anyway, back to Passover, right? Woo, squirrel. Anyway, so the horseradish gets set off a little bit by the charoseth, which brings us to the next thing on the Seder plate, which is the charoseth. Okay, the charoseth, you just have a little bit on the Seder plate, and so there's not a whole lot to go around. I usually do make another small dish of it to pass around for the Seder sandwich, but then I also make a large dish of it to have as a side dish with the meal because people really, really like the charoseth. And the charoseth is just chopped up apples with either chopped walnuts or chopped almonds, and then wine or grape juice if that's what you're using, and cinnamon. And you just mix it all together, and it's really yummy. But anyway, so that's the charoseth. The bitter herbs, of course, represent that life was bitter as slaves in Egypt, and for us, it represents that life was bitter under sin. The charoseth represents the bricks that the Israelites built and the mortar for those bricks. And then during that part of the Seder, you tell the part about how Pharaoh said that they couldn't have straw for making the bricks and stuff like this, and he just made their lives very, very bitter. But you talk about how even amidst the bitterness of slavery and even amidst our difficult times, life is still really sweet. And so there's beautiful things in all of the symbolism in this. Okay, then you have an egg, and the egg is supposed to be hard-boiled and then roasted in the oven until it gets brown. And I usually roll it a little bit first so that it cracks, so that you get all these pretty little lines in it when it's roasted. I don't know why I do that. It's just prettier, I think. Sometimes I do dye the eggs, like Easter eggs, or whoever is bringing the eggs, I tell them that they have the choice of either roasting them or dyeing them, because as Christians, of course, we're going to be celebrating Easter, and so I kind of like to make that connection between the two. Some people don't like the whole Easter egg thing, and that's fine. Then don't do dyed eggs. That's fine. But to me, I like tying those two things together. And each person has to have an egg. So you want to make sure that there's enough eggs for each person, and then one for the Seder plate. And I usually put the one on the Seder plate, and then I put the rest in a bowl or a basket on the table. And I always try to put these things close to the person who I've assigned to talk about it in the Seder script, so that they're not having to reach across somebody or anything. It's right there in front of them, so that when they're reading their part, they can lift that up and talk about it. And so anyway, so those are the elements of the Seder plate and what they mean. And one thing I also wanted to mention is if you're going to have a Seder and you're going to be inviting guests, don't provide everything yourself. Ask them to bring part of the Seder meal. What I usually do is I have kind of a potluck for the supper part, and I ask everybody to bring something for the potluck, and and we don't have dessert. You don't want to have dessert because the afikomen, the piece of uh, uh, matzah that you eat after the children find it, that's supposed to be the last thing that you eat for the night. So don't have dessert, but you can have people bring vegetables, meats, salad, those kinds of things. You don't want to have croutons because that would be leavened. So just kind of keep those things in mind. But also keep in mind that it's going to be about 2 hours from the time that they arrive until you eat dinner. And so it's got to be something that can be kept warm. If a whole bunch of people are bringing stuff, then somebody can't be baking their things because everybody else has to have their things in the oven to stay warm. And if people have a crock pot or something, then that's really helpful. But I also ask people to bring one of the elements from the Seder. It would probably be easier for me to just bring everything for the Seder plate because I know what I'm looking for. I can go to the grocery store. I can get it all in one place. But the reason that I suggest having each of your guests bring something is because this creates a sense of anticipation in them. I mean, they're wondering, why do you want me to bring horseradish? Or you want me to bring parsley? What? And you tell them, well, you'll find out what it means at the Seder. And so it's like they've got skin in the game, and there's this anticipation, and you can ask them to have their kids guess at what it means or why you're going to have it or what you're going to do with it and stuff like that. I'll usually have somebody make the charoseth, so I tell them how to make it, and there's not really a recipe for it. You just chop up apples and toss in some wine or grape juice, which helps keep them from turning brown, and then chop up your nuts and put them in and sprinkle it all with a lot of cinnamon and mix it all up really well and just to taste, and it's really good. But so I have people bring all those things. The other thing is that whatever you're drinking, consider everybody's going to have 4 wine glasses. And then whatever you're drinking for dinner too. So I generally go a bottle of wine or a bottle of sparkling cider or a bottle of grape juice per every 2 people. And I will that's one of the more expensive things to have for the Seder. So I'll usually ask each family to bring 1 or 2 bottles, and that just works out really well. But it just helps to have everybody participating. And then there are other things that you need too, like candles and pillows and stuff. And I have all those things listed in each of my books. There's a list of everything that you need so that you can gather it. But it helps to have people bring a pillow to sit behind them, so they don't probably want to bring a bed pillow, but a cushion kind of thing, and make sure that you have enough chairs. And so you might want to ask a few people to bring chairs too, if that's necessary. But let people participate in that way. Don't just do it all for them, because then they're not really participating. They're just coming, and yeah, it's not as much fun. It's a lot more fun if they participate. So I really do recommend that you do it that way. And in my books, especially in the Passover Heart Project and the email series, I do have kind of a countdown of, you need to do this far ahead. You need to do this far ahead. I think that in Next Year to New Jerusalem, I tell you what you need to do, but I don't really give you a specific, like, how far ahead you need to do it or anything like that. So you kind of have to figure that out for yourself. But if you need help with that, just send me a message and I can help you out with it. Okay, I love you all. And next video will be the final one. This is where we talk about the 3rd and 4th cups. And this is where we talk about the Passover wine or grape juice. And so I think that it's really meaningful. It's very special to me, and I love you all. I will see you next time. Bye-bye.